State prisons are bursting at the seams. Oklahoma has the nation's 5th highest incarceration rate, and prisons are now more at 99% capacity. Lawmakers last year passed Smart on Crime legislation designed to cut the burgeoning prison population while reducing violent crime. But concerns over funding are raising questions about the future of the reforms.
Governor Mary Fallin last year signed House Bill 3052 into law, calling it a top priority for her administration. Passage of the bill culminated a 3-year effort to reform the state's criminal justice system and take some of the pressure off overcrowded prisons. Former House Speaker Chris Steele is the author of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative. Steele argues while Oklahoma consistently has one of the nation's highest incarceration rates, putting more inmates behind bars hasn't reduced violent crime.
For all the people that we're incarcerating and for all the money that we're spending on incarceration, we look at our violent crime rates and we realize that in the last decade they virtually remain unchanged. In fact, our violent crime has increased in certain areas of the state.
A report from the Pew Center for the States shows the average prison sentence in Oklahoma has nearly doubled in the past 2 decades, rising from 1.7 years in 1990 to 3.1 years in 2009. Meanwhile, statistics compiled by the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation indicate the number of violent crimes reported has remained steady over the past 10 years. The new legislation, which took effect November 1st, places more emphasis on rehabilitation and steering nonviolent offenders away from prison and toward mental health and substance abuse treatment. Alex Wentz is Governor Fallin's communications director. Wentz says the governor remains very supportive of the program.
The governor campaigned on this. She helped Speaker Steele and others shepherd this initiative through the legislature. She signed it into law, and she remains absolutely committed to seeing this program work.
As a matter of fact, it's been delay after delay after delay after delay as far as actually meeting the various benchmarks that the working group is scheduled to meet and getting any sort of meaningful or significant or sincere cooperation from the governor's office.
Matters came to a head March 14th when Steele and Oklahoma County District Attorney David Prater resigned as co-chairs of a working group overseeing implementation of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative. The resignations came after lawmakers approved legislation backed by the governor, creating a politically appointed panel to replace the committee.
I could not, in good faith, ask the members of the JRI working group to continue to meet and to give of their time and their energy if their input was not going to be validated or matter at anything. I feel like the governor was making a mockery of the actual implementation process.
Wentz insists the governor appreciates the advice her office has received from the informal working group.
What the governor wants to do, and what the legislature seems to be leaning towards as well, is to create an official government entity that can work more directly with state agencies like corrections, like mental health, the governor's office, the attorney general's office, the agencies that are actually implementing this.
Prater argues it's unlikely the panel created by the new legislation would implement meaningful reform.
They took the multidisciplinary function completely out of it, and they took law enforcement out of it, took the judiciary out of it, took the DAs out of it, and pulled them off that board. And then in this amended bill that they got passed last week through the House, now it's a 9-member politically appointed board.
Steele says tensions between his group and the governor's office actually began last fall. When the committee held its first meeting, no executive agency directors were present.
And we discovered later, behind the scenes, it was because the governor's office had instructed them not to participate. And so D.A. Prater and myself went and met with Steve Mullins and the governor's staff and said, is there a problem, and what can we do to remedy the situation? And the governor's office said that they weren't comfortable with the meeting being subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Steele was also taken aback by the governor's rejection last month of a $375,000 federal grant to help implement the initiative.
This money would go for training of local law enforcement entities to know what evidence-based practices are available to reduce crime in their local jurisdiction. The funding would go to train our district attorneys and our defense attorneys to know how to utilize and implement the reforms and the tools now available through the Justice Reinvestment Initiative.
Wentz calls the decision not to accept federal funds a non-issue.
We have a $7 billion budget in the state of Oklahoma. Normally for state programs, we use state dollars to fund them, so the governor decided we're going to go ahead and use state funding to cover the cost of that training.
Wentz says the issue is one of credibility.
We don't want people to confuse it with some sort of federal initiative or with something that the Obama administration is pushing on us. So in that case, I think it enhances the credibility for people of Oklahoma who are not always friendly to federal initiatives or Obama administration initiatives.
Prater is concerned that justice reform is being starved of necessary funding.
If you truly are supportive of an initiative, you've got to fund it. I think the Justice Reinvestment Initiative is at best on life support. I believe that the political will that got that passed last year is waning. And I would be really surprised if we're going to see it continue.
Wentz insists the plan is being funded, pointing to risk assessment centers operated by the Department of Mental Health for inmates with substance abuse problems.
We're screening them. We're seeing which ones are appropriate to steer away from the penal system and into more of a treatment path and get them back out in their communities with supervision.
Steele counters money for those risk assessment centers is coming from existing funds rather than increased appropriations.
The Department of Mental Health was one of the agencies that clearly stated that they're having to use money that would otherwise be utilized for direct services to pay for the training of those who now are administering the risk assessments.
The governor's office maintains the Justice Reinvestment Initiative is still moving forward and will be fully funded in the next fiscal year.